WHAV Open Mic.
From the Edwin B. Johnson Newsroom, WHAV presents the Open Mic Show with Frank Kamola. Make your voice heard. Call 978-374-1900. That's 978-374-1900. And welcome to the Open Mic Show. Yes, it's me, Tim Coco. Frank Kamola, your regular host, has a back injury. We won't get into details. He didn't ask us to get into details, but he did say it was okay to say he had a back injury. He's recovering. He should be back on the program next week. Now, I obviously hosted this show for many years, and I always considered myself a fill-in for Jack Bevilacqua. Well, I'm going to fill in now for Frank Kamola. On the program tonight, we have the two co-chairs of the Merrimack Valley Project, Alice Mann, and it's been on the program before, I believe, for Team Haverhill and River Ruckus and all kinds of good deeds in the city of Haverhill. And we have, and I may not be pronouncing it right, Fermin de la Cruz?
Fermin de la Cruz.
Fermin de la Cruz. I'll try that. All right. Before we get to our guests and the many, many questions that we receive from audience members in the comments sections at WHAV.net, we're going to do, are we on TV tonight? Could you check with them? All right. And also, well, WHAV FM 97.9 for this program, streaming live to WHAV's Facebook page, and also streaming live to your computers and smartphones at WHAV.tv. All right, the big thing everyone always asks is about the birthday and anniversary cake contest. So we're taking August birthdays and anniversaries. They'll just simply call the program, give the name of the recipient, the person, can be yourself, the person you would like to receive the cake from Albee D's Second Generation Italian Bakery, 140 South Main Street in Bradford. It's very easy. You simply wish a happy birthday or a happy anniversary. Chris will have taken the name of the recipient, put it in the hat, and we'll draw the name on the last Monday of the month. Now, I know I've received several telephone calls from people who asked about the winner of the last cake. The winner's name is Janet, and I believe they announced that after the TV had already moved on to other programming, so that may be why you didn't hear that. Do we still have a Kimball Tavern Antiques trivia question? I think there's still a question outstanding. To receive a $10 gift certificate, same as cash, to Kimball Tavern Antiques, corner of Salem and South Main Streets. Name the first name, the last name, and the nickname of the man who collected hubcaps on Washington Street. I believe that is the question. The judges have already given away several parts of that answer. So the first person to answer that correctly receives a $10 gift certificate to Kimball Tavern Antiques. Okay, time will be tight. This is going to be a detailed discussion about Merrimack Valley Project. Now, those of you who are regular listeners and readers to WHAV.net or on the air at 97.9, WHAV had a story about the Merrimack Valley Project meeting at St. James Church, is that right, on June 17th?
Yes.
And the photograph at WHAV.net showed some seats with various officials who did not attend. We're going to ask about that tonight. And we're going to ask more about what does the Merrimack Valley Project mean, what is its goals, and some of your questions. So let's start with Fermin. You are from the Dominican Republic?
Yeah, I am Dominican.
How long have you been in the United States? And tell us about your career history and about the process of coming here.
Okay, thank you. I have visited the United States during many years as a visitor, but as a resident, I moved 3.5 years to Hebron.
3.5 years?
Yes, in Hebron. I moved to Hebron because I have 2 sons living here. So I decided to move because I needed some specialized medical care.
Okay. So
Yeah.
medical care.
Yes, and
And your children were living here.
no, for my person.
Okay.
I moved here because was better to pay attention to my health.
Makes sense?
And to be with
Yes,
your family.
Yes,
Yeah.
So, I moved with my family. Yes.
Chris, are our levels okay? Okay.
My sons are citizens, live here many years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your sons are citizens.
Yes.
And what is your status? Green
You're-
card or
Yes, yes,
Legal
yes,
resident.
yes, I have a
Okay.
resident. Yes,
legal resident of the
Yes,
United States?
I have my green
Absolutely.
card.
And what were you telling me earlier? You were a lawyer?
yes. I was a lawyer in Santo Domingo, an accountant too.
And an accountant?
Yes.
Well, those are the twin evils. No. I'm kidding. We need them.
Those males.
The worst, the other worst is I was a politician. I have a
Boy, you're really going for it, aren't you?
I have a master's degree in political science.
A master's degree in political
Yeah,
science, and you were a
yes.
politician. What position did you hold?
Oh, many positions. I have been a leader in one of the most important political party in Dominican Republic, the Partido Revolucionario Dominicano. I was in the highest level in the board of this party, and I was also a national representative. That is something that like here federal representative
Congress.
in the
Yes,
Congress.
yes.
In the Congress.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
As someone who sought office unsuccessfully, I'm I'm impressed. Thank you.
But all my activities, my professional activities have been in the private. I only have this position. The history is very large because I was looking for this position. People were asking that I accept the position.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Well, that's a nice position to be in a way. How did you get involved with the Merrimack Valley Project?
Oh, I have a long history of working with community engagement in my country. So when I moved here, it was natural that I tried to connect with this type of activities. So one day, one commission or Merrimack Valley Project visited our church and gave some information about what was Merrimack Valley Project, and then I engaged with them and have been working hard with them.
Okay.
Fermin is a member of St. James Roman Catholic Church
Okay.
in Haverhill.
Okay, so you're a member of the church. Okay.
Yes.
Now, Alice, you've been involved in everything, but
A few things.
how did you get involved with the Merrimack Valley Project? And maybe after that, tell us roughly what it is. It goes back to 1992. Is that right?
89, actually.
Oh, all right.
And there are 27 member groups, and the geography ranges from Amesbury to Westford, but it includes Haverhill, Lawrence, and Lowell as the 3 largest cities in the group. And it's made up of congregations and local labor unions and community-based organizations. And so Fermin came in through his church, I came in through my church, which is Trinity Episcopal, which is a long-time member of the Merrimack Valley Project. And it started very simply. They needed a couple more people for the team. And I knew a little bit about this kind of faith and values-based community organizing, which is the way I would characterize it, working for justice through that particular way of working in the community. Have found it a surprisingly personally deep and meaningful experience for me. I mean, I find it extremely engaging at a personal level, and particularly in terms of.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, when I think of, I suspect that people on many parts of the political spectrum were rocked one way or another by the recent presidential campaign and so forth, maybe for a whole variety of different reasons.
I think everyone would agree with that.
I personally was rocked. I was surprised by the outcome and surprised by the level of venom being expressed. And just grappling with what in the world do you do with that. And one of the wonderful things about this kind of faith and values-based community organizing is that it's deeply based in relationships. It's not all politics and fight and strategy and issues and all of that. It's really human beings in the same city getting to know each other at a deep level, getting to know what they worry about, what they hope for, bringing those deepest values together to struggle together for something that benefits not just me, but benefits others in the community. And being able to have friendships with some of our Latino neighbors who, frankly, I would not know Fermin if I wasn't in the Merrimack Valley Project. And there are many. That's just one of many friendships that has grown.
Oh,
so there's a quality to it that is very healing, and very supportive of all kinds of people to have a role in acting for justice and for progress, often for people who have the least. So.
All right. I believe we have a call, Chris. Why don't we take the break? We're going to go back to my old habits. Take the break a little late. Is this call related to the questions or the cakes?
Brian.
All right, let's take that call. And it's on your side?
Yeah.
Oh, and I guess if you'd like to hear the call, can't hear it with this mic's on.
There we go.
All right, this is Brian. You're on the Open Mic Show, Brian.
Hey, stranger.
All right, I wasn't going to interrupt this conversation except for you.
Oh,
because
I'm flattered.
You always kick off the broadcasts. So, yes, I'm filling in tonight.
Filling in.
So how are you, Brian?
I'm okay. I'm hanging on.
What's
That's
on
all
your
I can
mind
say.
tonight?
Now, can we raise the levels on the guests?
I'm going to ask Chris to ride that as high as he can. Okay, yes.
Well, I can hear Alice more so, and it's a little more difficult to hear el abogado contable.
All right. So, well, okay. We're going to adjust as much as we can in here. I'm going to ask Chris to bring up the levels as I bring down mine, because I'm probably causing the balance issue.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, that's just the way this works. Okay. So, you have a birthday entrance for us?
I did, but for August, I was going to call in Pat, and her son Mark beat me to the punch.
Oh, really?
So
I think I know who you mean then.
And that's the only August one I have.
Does Chris have that?
Yeah, he's got it.
Okay, all right.
Well, Mark was engineering that night, and he's got it.
Okay, yeah, that's as long as we have it.
And last week, the July winner was Jackie, not Janet.
Okay, yes, I got that wrong. I was trying to do it from memory, which apparently is not as good as it used to be.
I don't think we had a Janet in the hat.
Okay, no. Our listeners keep track of the contest better than I do. All right, so Jackie was the last name beginning in
Still
A.
waiting for a thing.
All right, okay. I know that we had several people call who, I think the announcement came late in the program, so
Well,
that's
it did.
why.
It came when the program was over.
Yeah, well, that's why it was late. I heard you call in and ask for it, so I was listening. I don't remember where I was. All right, then. Anything else on your mind?
Oh, no, just the usual stuff I'll be talking to you about offline.
All right, Brian. Well, thank you for kicking off another show. You're my regular starter, okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you very much, Brian.
You have a good evening, and good evening to Alice. And I didn't catch Mr.'s name there.
Fermin de la Cruz.
I called him El Abogado Contable.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much.
All right, then. Thank you very much, Brian.
You have a good time.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, we're going to, now Chris is missing from the control room. Chris?
All right.
Can you hang up
Now,
that
1 second, Frank. No.
hang up that phone? Because that causes an echo when it's off the hook. Okay, we're going to go to a break. We'll be back in just a moment with our guest from the Merrimack Valley Project here on the Open Mic Show.
Open mic.
Frank Kamoa and the Open Mic will be right back. Get in on the action. Call 978-374-1900. If you're enjoying this program, call and become a 97.9 WHAV FM member right now, or visit WHAV.net. Your membership helps keep vital community services on the air.
97.9 FM, WHAV.
Catch the wave.
Hi, Tom Bergeron here. I started at WHAV in 1972. And look, WHAV's still here, but it won't be if you don't help support it. Go to WHAV.net. Become a contributor. Keep us going.
Catch the wave. WHAV. Open mic.
From the Edwin B. Johnson Newsroom, WHAV presents the Open Mic Show with Frank Kamoa. Make your voice heard. Call 978-374-1900. That's 978-374-1900. And we're back on the Open Mic Show. Okay, let me start with a little bit of a disclaimer during this part of the program. I am married to an immigrant, and I have had some immigration issues. My spouse has accrued not 1 hour of time in the United States without permission. But somehow there seems to be an impression that if someone speaks with an accent, they must somehow be here illegally. And I don't know why that persists. We're going to ask a little bit about that. But my spouse, every minute of his time, has been in the United States with the legal permission of the United States government. And when the United States government tried to change the rules, we fought them. And but now my spouse is a green card holder. I just want to get that disclaimer out there because there's always a few who will later reinterpret events if I don't say that. So I'm going to put that out there. But you know, it really starts, maybe it's a way that I can start this. And I will go through all the questions that listeners have sent. But I want to, I want to begin there because there seems to be some misperception that people, for example, from Puerto Rico, which is a territory of the United States, are somehow not here illegally. And I'm hoping that is a very, very small minority opinion, but I see it everywhere. And it makes me wonder if people really don't understand the immigration issue, so-called. And I don't know if this is an appropriate question for the Merrimack Valley Project, but either of you find that people do not understand what an immigrant is, or the shades of the process, whether it's a legal resident alien or a green card holder, same thing, or a citizen, or that. Have you found this to be a challenge at all?
I found it a challenge for myself. I'll let also Fermin comment about what that's like from the immigrant side of things. But as a person who doesn't have to deal with this routinely, I don't happen to have a family member who is attempting to immigrate. I do have a family member who migrated to another country and now has her dual citizenship.
Okay.
But it's a very complex system. And it's been hammered together over the years, but has not been seriously reviewed and streamlined and clarified for many, many years now, because it gets stuck in Congress every time a proposal comes forward, whether it comes forward from a Republican or a Democrat.
Congress and stuck seem to go together.
And so it's this mishmash of accumulated rules that don't necessarily address the current situation and they're difficult to understand for anybody, and if you're not dealing with it any day. But the thing I would say that was the newest piece of information to me is that what we would call an administrative violation of one's immigration status is nowhere in the criminal code. That's not where it lives. And so I've had many people, even in law enforcement, say, well, if you're here without your proper documentation, that's a crime. And actually, it's not in the criminal code. It's an administrative violation, and that's a different thing. And that has actually...
That's a very interesting distinction. So let's go through that really slow. All right. It is not a crime as far as the... is it the code of the United States?
Right. And I'll give you a practical consequence of that. If I'm arrested, the police officer has to say to me, you have the right to remain silent, and you are entitled to representation.
The
Miranda rights, okay? Well, because immigration violations are not in the criminal code, even though an undocumented person, anybody in the United States, has the same right to be represented, not necessarily to have representation paid for, but anybody off the street that you run into, regardless of their status, does not have to speak to a law enforcement officer without a lawyer. However, it's only in the criminal code that the Miranda rights are required, and now you're outside the criminal code in this administrative area that has an enforcement dimension called ICE, and they're not required to tell me if they're addressing me about an immigration issue. They're not required to tell me that I have the right to be represented by an attorney.
That's interesting.
I have the right. They don't have to tell me I have the right. So they can saunter up,
so that's
have
where
a chat with me.
The different codes become...
It matters.
But the fact that I just want to make sure that I'm clear. The fact that the United States government can begin a deportation proceeding is another section of the government, but and maybe it's not technically a crime, but it is illegal to have come to the U.S. without...
It's an administrative violation, and the government is empowered to act on that administrative violation.
Well, interesting you say that. Now that I think about it, most of our appeals with my spouse's case are through the Administrative Procedures Act. So I guess that makes sense to me. That's interesting. Fermin, then, your experience, do you find you are a legal resident of the United States? And I'm even hesitant to use the term, there are no illegal people. There may be these gray areas we'll come to for now. But you are here completely with the permission of the United States government. Do you find, have you faced discrimination or comments because you perhaps have an accent?
Personally, I don't have any discrimination, but I know that immigrant suffers the discrimination in different ways. We feel discrimination because our language is not good, is not clear. Many people don't speak anything in English.
Well, I find that you're very clear.
Yeah.
So,
Also, the job that with the immigration do is some of the works that American citizens don't like to do.
that's a good point. We'll go back to that.
Yes. Also, the payment for the immigrant is lower than other people that have their citizenhood. All these cultural situations made the immigrant don't feel comfortable, and they feel that they are discriminated. Yes.
All right. We are just at time for news, so we're going to take a break for news. When we come back, we're going to go through the questions that have been submitted by listeners of WHAV and readers of WHAV.net. So if you stand by, we have local news, national news, local weather. It's all going to go by pretty fast, and we'll be back here on the Open Mic Show in just a minute.
Open mic!
Frank Kamoa and the Open Mic will be right back. Get in on the action. Call 978-374-1900. If you're enjoying this program, call and become a 97.9 WHAV FM member right now, or visit WHAV.net. Your membership helps keep vital community services on the air.
It's 7:01.
WHAV LP Haverhill.
Here's what's happening in local news. The Lone City Council, to vote against this year's city budget, is calling for what he calls a blueprint for Haverhill's future. In a guest column appearing at WHAV.net today, City Council President John Mitchison said the city will attract businesses and good jobs if it first improves education, public safety, and housing. Currently, the burden on both public safety and the schools is increasing as more families in the school district are disadvantaged financially and are struggling, Mitchison said. We need to explore the best ways to not only attract the right workforce, but also grow it within our city. To achieve his goal, the council president said Haverhill must create a long-term, comprehensive strategy and action plan. Once in place, the blueprint would be followed by budgets that meet the plan and measures to track performance of city services and schools. City Council will be asked to approve another downtown waterfront residential project, this one much smaller in scale than the recently constructed Harbor Place and recently approved 10-story Haverhill Heights. Phil Rice, trustee for Sanders Courier Realty Trust, seeks the council's permission to create 4 market-rate residential units in the building that now houses the Lasting Room restaurant and bar. Rice's request will be considered in a public hearing when the council meets at 7 p.m. Tuesday in the Theodore Pelosi Jr. City Council chambers on the second floor of Haverhill City Hall. Comments for and against the project will be allowed. The units would occupy the top 2 floors, which are currently unused, at 116 to 122 Washington Street. Under the Waterfront District zoning regulations, the project requires a special permit from the council. The exterior of the former shoe factory will not be changed, Rice said. The developers plan to lease 5 parking spaces in the MVRTA parking garage on Granite Street. In a letter to the City Council, Economic Development and Planning Director William Pillsbury recommended approval. The proposed project represents an excellent development consistent with all the goals of the city to revitalize downtown, Pillsbury wrote. The redevelopment of the current Lasting Room building into a mixed-use market-rate project is a strong positive indication of the private sector confidence in investing in Haverhill. Other agenda items include pay raises for the mayor and city council to become effective on January 1st, permits for a series of movies on 6 consecutive Thursday nights beginning July 13th in the waterfront parking lot next to Haverhill Bank, and discussions on the Merrimack Street restaurant bump-outs, and a progress report on plans to build a softball field for the HHS girls team. Methuen police are investigating a beating and robbery that took place early Saturday night. Gustavo Rosario came to the police station Saturday at about 8:20 p.m., bleeding from his face, according to a report. He told police he was beaten and robbed by 2 men on Camden Street while sitting in his parked car. He said a heavy-set, light-skinned man entered the car through the rear driver's side door. The man was wearing glasses, a black baseball hat, black pants, and sweatshirt. At the same time, another heavy-set, light-skinned male wearing all black entered through the rear passenger side door. The first man displayed a black firearm, demanded all of Rosario's belongings, pistol-whipped him, and ripped a gold chain from his neck. Rosario tried driving away with the men still in back, but one reached forward and pushed the shift back into park, police said. Once the car stopped, the man with the firearm threatened to kill Rosario and struck him in the head with the gun several more times. Rosario managed to flee the car, and they observed the men running away as well. Besides the 2 men in the rear, Rosario believes a third man served as a lookout. He is described as black, tall, thin-build, and wearing a black sweater, white T-shirt, and red shorts. Methuen firefighters provided first aid and took Rosario to Holy Family Hospital. Methuen police are also looking for a female known on Facebook as Sissy Papers who may have witnessed the scene. Anyone with information is asked to call Detectives Charles DeJesus or David Souther at 978-983-8698. Remember, WHAV is the only Haverhill-based news source. There's always more at WHAV.net. In the Edwin V. Johnson newsroom, this is Tim Coco.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Priscilla Huff. Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi has formally declared victory over the Islamic State in Mosul. The U.S.-led coalition warns lots of fighting remains. The son of the American president is answering questions about his meeting last summer with a Russian attorney with ties to the Kremlin. The International Red Cross is tracking more than 300,000 cases of cholera in Yemen. Ukraine eyes NATO membership.
Wave weather.
I'm WHAV meteorologist Rob St. Pierre with Wave Weather. And for tonight, we're going to see increasing clouds, maybe even a shower getting in here as we head through the overnight hours and toward daybreak. Nighttime low in the upper 60s. We're going to sneak in some sun for Tuesday. It is going to be more humid. We'll be in the mid to upper 80s. Watch for some showers and thunderstorms, especially in the afternoon. Showers and storms will ease off Tuesday night, low near 70, partly sunny and less humid Wednesday, low 80s. I'm WHAV meteorologist Rob St. Pierre. Your next Wave Weather in 30 minutes.
Stay informed each day with local news, coupled with FSN's worldwide coverage. 97.9 WHAV is the only Haverhill-based news source. There's always more at WHAV.net.
WHAV, Merrimack Valley, open mic.
From the Edwin V. Johnson newsroom, WHAV presents the Open Mic Show with Frank Camola. Make your voice heard. Call 978-374-1900. That's 978-374-1900. And welcome back to the Open Mic Show. I'm Tim Coco, filling in for Frank Camola. Frank hurt his back this weekend. He'll be back next week. We all wish him well. All right, in studio tonight, we have Fermin de la Cruz and Alice Mann, local co-chairs of the Merrimack Valley Project. Just prior to this, we discussed what the project is. Now we're going to get into some of the details. We had some questions from listeners that Frank invited, and here's one. What does a sanctuary city mean? And is the Merrimack Valley Project advocating for such a step in Haverhill?
I'd say sanctuary city is an informal term. The more formal proposal that has been before the legislature is called the Safe Communities Act. which has specific kinds of provisions that would. And Merrimack Valley Project has been in support of the Safe Communities Act. I believe that is not, at the moment, actively moving forward. I think that's being worked and improved.
Is it in a committee of the legislature?
I'm not sure what the exact status is right now.
Okay.
But I think the notion of that informal term, sanctuary cities, is to reassure people that law enforcement will cooperate with ICE in matters of criminal charges, which frankly members of the immigrant community, they want that to happen too, because they also don't want to be the victims of crime any more than anybody else in the community.
That's a good question. We'll get to that.
But that when it comes to only administrative actions, for example, detaining someone whose name has come up as not being fully documented, asking the local police somehow to detain that person on behalf of ICE. That is something that many police departments are saying, we're just not getting involved in that. That's not something we're required to do, and if we get involved in that and get involved in inquiring into the immigration status of somebody who's stopped because they have a taillight out on their car, what's going to happen is people completely stop talking to the police. People in the immigrant community stop reporting crime and stop cooperating as witnesses when a crime occurs, because they then expect to be interrogated about their immigration status. I mean,
that's an excellent point. Let's just spend another second on that part of this. Correct me if I'm wrong. The summary is the police want people to feel free to report crimes because the alternative is worse.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, in communities where there is some kind of provision along the lines of this informal term, sanctuary cities, actually the crime rate is lower than in communities that do not have such a provision.
Interesting.
And I believe that it's the basic principle that when a community cooperates with the police, it makes everybody safer.
Have you found people in Greater Haverhill afraid to call in a crime? Or is that part of the job of the Merrimack Valley Project, to reassure them that they are encouraged to report if they are a victim of a crime?
In fact, Father Murray and members of Merrimack Valley Project at St. James have worked directly with our police chief around some very specific cases. I'm not going to get into the details, but where a crime was committed and people were very uncertain about whether and how they could report it. And the police worked very closely on some very specific cases, and we are hoping for much more continued cooperation of that kind with the immigrant community.
Yes.
And we have signals that our mayor and police department may be willing at this point to have those kinds of discussions with our immigrant neighbors to talk about some of this and about encouraging them to report and to cooperate with the police.
Actually, you just mentioned something that I'm sure some people picked up on, and I'm going to maybe use my own experience on this one. You mentioned someone with a taillight out. Now, I could just tell some people in our audience right now are saying, you mean they have a license or no? Well, I'm sorry to characterize you that way, listener, but my own situation, my spouse began a process, an immigration process, and if the U.S. government does not act on that petition within 150 days, that person can obtain a Social Security number and in turn obtain a driver's license. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. So they're not necessarily people with fake licenses or fake Social Security numbers, and I just feel in fairness, I want to get that out there because I can tell it was gelling in somewhere out there about that. So that's a good point. And this was not in WHAV story, but a listener who wrote to WHAV saw a quote in another media that's attributed to someone from Merrimack Valley Project, and this person was quoted as saying, "I'd say 15% of city residents are immigrants, but at Haverhill High School, 1/3 of students are immigrants." Do you know if what those numbers mean, or have you heard them before?
Well, I'm not an expert on those kind of statistics. I do want to say the word immigrant, I mean, anybody who's not a Native American, who's not a Pentucket Native American, of Pentucket band Native American, is an immigrant of some sort.
Well, I was hoping you'd go there because I'm going to parse that myself.
So, but the question about and then, immigrants come in many kinds. There are people who are legal residents, as you've indicated. The informal name for that is green card. There are people who are awaiting adjudication of their asylum status, who are leaving particularly hazardous situations and are entitled to be considered for that status.
Matter of fact, that is the Convention Against Torture. It is a treaty worldwide that regulates the actions of the United States government. Oddly, the U.S., pardon me, I know a little more about this than I'd like to know, the U.S. has not always upheld its treaty obligations.
There are people who could be accurately described as undocumented, that is, not having an up-to-date administrative permission to be in the United States. 40% of them are there because they had a visa and have stayed longer than the visa indicated, and most of those are from Canada, not from Mexico.
40%.
Most of the 40%.
Most of the
who
40%.
have overstayed their visas are actually from Canada.
So overstaying the visa is the most common administrative violation.
A common one,
and it's mostly Canadians. And that's very interesting. And the reason I ask this question, I'm trying to be fair to the listener, and I'm also trying to be fair in general. I believe this listener interpreted immigrant to mean someone illegally residing in the U.S.
Right.
And I want to make sure that
Can I
we're
comment?
clear.
There's some history to that we, I've only learned recently. We had an excellent presentation about it. In the first part of the 20th century, when frankly many of the grandparents of Haverhill residents arrived, some maybe 20 or 30 years before that, immigration matters were under the Department of Labor, and immigrants were regarded as workers. That shifted around the middle of the 20th century, and it was moved over to the Justice Department. And there was more sense of immigrants somehow being criminals, even though the administrative code is not part of the criminal code. And more recently, it's been under Homeland Security with the sort of implication that what an immigrant is a potential terrorist. So from worker to criminal to terrorist, it's getting worse and worse as time goes on. In fact, my people are from Germany and Ireland and Hungary, came for a whole variety of reasons. Hardly anybody leaves their home lightly. And the vast majority of people who are here struggling with gaining citizenship status have left their homes because of urgent matters of safety, economic survival, and similarly compelling reasons which any of us put under duress might consider seeking help across a border.
In my family, and my last name gives some of it away, but in my family, my grandfather came here from Italy, got a job in the mills in Lawrence, then sent for his family, My father happens to be one of the children who was actually born in the U.S., but most of his siblings were born in Italy. Compare and contrast that to my mother's side of the family, which came on the Mayflower's relief ship in 1621, the Fortune. So those are immigrants too, I think. So I don't want the listener or the viewer to think I'm taking any kind of position. What I really am aiming for here is to separate fact from myth. And then we may agree or disagree about what that means in practice. But right now we have to take a brief break for Community Spotlight. We'll be back with more of the Open Mic Show and a discussion of the Merrimack Valley Project right after this.
Open mic.
Frank Kamoa and the Open Mic will be right back. Get in on the action. Call 978-374-1900. If you're enjoying this program, call and become a 97.9 WHAV FM member right now, or visit WHAV.net. Your membership helps keep vital community services on the air.
Are you listening to WHAV on cable television? If so, join WHAV in thanking the board, staff, and members of your local public access channel.
Open mic.
This is Frank Kamola, host of the Open Mic Show. This Monday evening, 2 members of Haverhill's chapter of the Merrimack Valley Project will join me in studio beginning at 6:30 p.m. The Merrimack Valley Project brings member groups from across the valley to promote peace and understanding among congregations, labor unions, and community-based organizations. Local co-chairs Alice Mann and Fermin Cruz will discuss the immigration issue. You can join the discussion by calling 978-374-1900.
Community Spotlight.
The Bradford Common Outdoor Music Series kicks off on Friday, July 7th. The Haverhill Cultural Council and First Church of Christ are teaming up to present 2017's Bradford Common Outdoor Music Series. Now in its 10th year, the concert series will feature 7 free live shows thanks to a grant from the city's Cultural Council. All shows begin at 6 p.m. on the Common, and attendees are encouraged to bring a blanket and lawn chairs to get comfortable. Concerts are scheduled through August, with a rain date of August 18th set aside in the event of inclement weather. For more information on this year's concerts, call 978-590-2119. Someone you know is on WHAV. To submit or read your own nonprofit announcements, click on the Contact tab at WHAV.net or email news@WHAV.net. In the Edwin V. Johnson Newsroom, this is Frank Kamola.
WHAV. Open mic.
From the Edwin V. Johnson Newsroom, WHAV presents the Open Mic Show with Frank Kamola. Make your voice heard. Call 978-374-1900. That's 978-374-1900. And we're back on the Open Mic Show. Our guests, Alice Mann, Fermin Cruz, local co-chairs of the Merrimack Valley Project. I'm probably moving through this too slowly, but we'll try. We have some more questions. This one comes from Jack. And Jack says, why should people support the Merrimack Valley Project when their stated goal is to support criminals in this country illegally who are imposing social criminal financial burden upon legal citizens? Before you answer, I want to say I haven't heard that as your stated goal.
Not in any way. And nobody I have met in the Merrimack Valley Project or in the immigrant community with which we interact is in support of violent criminals of any kind. I mean, that's...
It would be counterproductive now, wouldn't it?
Right. And in terms of, so-called burden, it's important for people to know that collectively, immigrants pay $12 billion in taxes each year, payroll and sales and property tax. They pay into Social Security and are entitled to zero back. So everything that all those workers who are not yet citizens put into the Social Security system is actually bolstering the fund for you and me, Tim. And
that's a good point. Okay, because I find your answer.
That's $12 billion a year.
All right, you're answering this person's financial burden, although I'm going to guess the follow-up would be, and I'll jump ahead to that person's question. I think Jack also asked that there's a cost to taxpayers of educating children of citizens who have residents who do not have legal status, and I'm actually terrible with the terms because there's really no good or polite term to use. That person suggested that at a average seat of $12,000 per year per student, this person's math came up to $13.4 million a year to educate these children. But I guess I'm gonna answer some of this for you. That assumes all are not here in the United States legally.
Correct.
But that is not necessarily the case.
In many cases, it's not true.
All right.
But I think it's important to let know to the people that most of the children are not sons or daughters of illegal person only, because most of the families in the last year are mixed.
Mixed?
Yes.
Oh, that's very
They are
interesting.
a citizen or a resident, legal resident, marry or joined with any illegal
Right.
person.
In
So
fact, it's 80%
Yes.
of the families
The
have
family.
that mixed status.
Well, that's interesting because that's another listener refers to the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment says that if you're born on U.S. soil, you are a citizen regardless of your parents' status. But in this case, you make an excellent point, Fermin. It's a little more complicated than even that.
yes.
Because one parent is an American citizen.
Yes.
Very,
Yes.
very
Yes.
interesting.
Yes.
Very interesting. Sure, I'm going to take some grief for explaining the facts. Another listener, Duncan, writes, does the Merrimack Valley Project believe the United States should have open borders? And he puts in parentheses, no vetting process or lacking sovereignty. I actually have not seen a list of what you support or not support, but do you favor open borders?
I don't think the Merrimack Valley Project has a position on national immigration policy, except that there ought to be one that is up to date and that takes account of the current situation. For example, we've had a negative net migration from Mexico since 2008. So we don't need an immigration policy that presumes that there's a tidal wave from Mexico.
Well, that's
because in
interesting.
fact the wave is actually to some extent going in the other direction, and that was before the current situation of the current administration. That's been true since
the
2008.
2008 recession, which, by the way, most Americans should be upset that wages have also been stagnant, and for the 20 years before that, average wages are stagnant in the United States. As if we were to adjust for inflation, what our families had in the 1960s, we're not doing as well as we thought. So I suppose it's not a surprise that people from other countries find that they're a little stagnant for them too.
And this is not any kind of official MV position, but just today on the radio, I heard a man, a melon grower in California, talking about having to leave tons and tons of fruit sitting in the field because he typically needs 300 workers all at the same time working that field to bring in that crop immediately when it's ready to be harvested. And so what he was calling for, and all I can say personally, it sounded sensible to me, was some way for people who are here and hardworking and not engaged in any kind of criminal activity, to have some kind of path to citizenship. And perhaps in terms of agriculture, we may also need, an updated guest worker policy. But I don't think the point for our work of Merrimack Valley Project is, we've got the right answer about the perfect immigration policy. Just the observation that the one we've got now, which has not been updated in so long, creates a whole raft of problems for people here and now today. And I think we're trying to address the kinds of issues hardworking people are facing here and now today in our community.
I think Fermin said this earlier. I think it was on air, might have been in a break, that some immigrants take the jobs Americans don't want to do.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
And I don't know of anyone who argued that. It didn't show up in any of the questions. Do you have any examples? I think you just gave us one about the melons, but maybe wasn't your point.
In the South, chicken plants that has to be one of the bloodiest, most dangerous, stressful kinds of work in the universe. There's lots of others, but that's another kind of regional example. I don't know, in our particular area, a good number of the minimum wage jobs are probably going to immigrants, and in many cases,
because in snow, for example.
And they're able to be cheated out of even their minimum wage by employers who have immigration status to hold over people as a threat. So they're making them work extra, undocumented hours, so to speak, hours that are not on the clock and are not being compensated, withholding checks. That is not an uncommon story.
Actually, that I guess it brings up an entirely different issue, and I don't know that Merrimack Valley Project even thought to address it or even is concerned about it. But it seems to me that United States corporations are creating a demand, if any exists, for such workers, because otherwise, although there are I-9s, I believe, I don't know that corporations actually take time to check them, and I understand that it's pretty well known, even in the local restaurant industry, that there is an expectation that some of their existing employees will not have, some will not have Social Security cards and that kind of thing. So do you think that if there was a penalty imposed relating to people who do not reside in the U.S. illegally, would it be at least partially the employer's fault?
I guess all I want to comment on, and I think for Merrimack Valley Project we want to comment on, is the duress that many of our immigrants of many different statuses, actually some who, like Fermin, fully documented legal resident, but in some cases are swept up in ICE raids, without questions asked. I mean, the duress that people are experiencing today is what we're focused on.
No, good point. And the only reason I'm asking these questions is that they were invited. But I think maybe there's some positives to this, because although it may not be your purpose as the Merrimack Valley Project, I think you've done quite a bit already to dispel some myths. And in that regard, I think they're valuable. I do agree, though, that we should be talking about what the Merrimack Valley Project is, and not about some of these other things. So I'm just going to...
And if I can just comment a little piece of history, just a little balanced view of Merrimack Valley Project. I mean, in 2007, MVP helped save 1,000 jobs in Devon at the Gillette Packing Center.
Well, please tell us about that.
By doing a social impact study showing that cutting those jobs would have cost $23 million in tax revenue plus all the personal income involved. And so I think that's the kind of issue that people can identify with and are worried about across the political spectrum, the disappearance of livable jobs. We've also been involved in many communities in trying to address the situation of temporary workers who, as you know, probably are often subject to getting the absolute minimum remuneration, no benefits.
I understand some are below the minimum.
Right. And so I just want to bring some balance to this, that this is an extension of a body of work with workers, of all backgrounds, of all levels of citizenship and so forth. But a particular focus right now, just because it's right on our doorstep.
All right. Maybe we'll see how this works with our discussion, because I do believe most of these questions are framed as though the Merrimack Valley Project means something that it hasn't itself said it means, and I think that's a problem with allowing this. But maybe the caller or the listener would have phrased them differently after hearing some of the initial comments, which is why sometimes we do take calls during the program. I'm rephrasing this, but I think the listener wants to know, does immigration cause income disparity? And I don't know that I want to speculate at what I think that person means. That somehow, I'll do a little bit, that somehow the presence of an immigrant who would work for less will take better money away from an American citizen. I'm going to guess that that's what the caller, the reader, is asking.
Again, I'm speaking only for myself and my, observations of the world. But I believe those who've really looked into this would say that most of the employment that has been lost to deindustrialization and the lack of match between the skill set that people could exercise in manufacturing, for example, and the skill set that's required of them in higher tech industries, and of the new low, sort of the new way that workers are being utilized. I mean, I think of something, for example, like an Amazon warehouse, okay, which is a whole different kind of job than anybody probably has pictured before. And in some ways, focusing on the immigrant as being the cause of employment distress for, especially that body of Americans that don't necessarily have a lot of advanced degrees, and may not live in a place where they have a lot of flexibility about where they go to work. They may not live in a metro area. To blame people who have crossed a border under duress, political fear for their life and the life of their family, or just economic distress that has caused them to need to go, like my Irish and Hungarian and German ancestors did, for exactly those reasons, including various forms of oppression. To say that that's the cause of income inequality in America, I think, personally, is a wrong.
No, I get
equation.
that. In a way, I feel really bad that.
But I mean, I understand the question. I understand why someone would ask that question, for sure.
Well, I mean, I think sometimes, if I may be so bold, that sometimes these kinds of questions help us indirectly get closer to the truth. But I agree with you, and I think most economists would agree with you, that the jobs problem is one of training and one of placing people. Now, we once had 12,000 workers 2 miles from here at Western Electric, then AT&T, and then Lucent Alcatel, and maybe that's getting closer to what happened to those jobs, those mergers. Corporations have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. They have no such responsibility to the communities where they're located. That's the law. But I think that probably has a lot more to do with it. And again, this is an opinion program, and I'm just putting mine out there. I think there are some people who do not understand, and I don't know that I did fully myself, what the Merrimack Valley Project is concerned about. But the Merrimack Valley Project is concerned, why don't you summarize? Chief concern of the Merrimack Valley Project, the chief worry that you're trying to address.
Well, many different concerns, but mainly the referring to the way that people the law, the system, try the immigrant. Try the immigrant. There's a wrong way to the wrong concept about the immigrant.
You want to correct the impression of the immigrant, whatever that status is, and it isn't 100% people who are living in the United States without permission. It's some percentage that we don't even know that number. And okay, I'm not trying to put words in anyone's mouth, but the more I look at these questions, the more I say I don't think the readers and listeners knew what Merrimack Valley Project is or was before this show.
I think the broader thing, again, faith and values-based community organizing. And so a general concern for justice, especially for people who do not have power before the larger systems of our society. An example there, we worked very hard in local communities during the foreclosure crisis, which in some ways is still going on for people, but to be proponents of laws that held the banks more accountable about the steps they had to go through before foreclosing, like requiring that a bank mediate with a family before foreclosure occurred, and also posting a bond so that the costs that the city incurred of inspection and maintenance for that now vacant property probably would be covered. So holding systems more accountable to the impact they're having on ordinary people, and particularly with people with who by themselves have little power. What we found is that when people together are talking with each other about their actual life situations, what they're actually confronting, and start working together to confront that not only for their own lives but for the lives of others in the community, then that's what we're trying to bring about. And whether it's around saving jobs in Devens, whether it's about better foreclosure accountability on banks, or whether it's about the situation of immigrants right here in Haverhill, those are all of a piece for us.
All right. Now, I'm clearly, as I look through the questions, I just think that there was a misinterpretation of what Merrimack Valley Project is, and I hope we've addressed that tonight. I hope that if we achieved one thing, that we've dispelled some myths. Probably take some heat for that summary, but the more I went through them, I realized that there were some bases here that maybe, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be discussed, but it isn't the issues that Merrimack Valley Project is working on. And then maybe we'll save that for another day when Frank is back. Not to push this on you, Frank.
I hope that our political systems engage in very vigorous debate about what would be a rational immigration policy and get an updated policy enacted. I believe that would be to the good.
I think it was, 2007 we had our last serious attempt, and it almost happened.
George W. Bush gave it a try, and he was not able to move that forward. And
it is funny when you find that George W. Bush was willing.
I think that issue mattered to him, and I think he really felt he wanted to get that done.
Well, a border state, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that was a factor. All right. Well, I really appreciate the time you've spent, and frankly, your patience as we move through some of those questions. And I'll take some more calls after you leave because I know that there were some others who are trying to get in, and I suspect the issues are going to be with me rather than with you at that point. So we'll take it from there.
Well, thank you, Tim. Thank you for having us on.
But thank you very much. Appreciate your coming to the station today. I think we need to probably talk more often, make sure that we're representing to the listener what it is you're trying to accomplish at the Merrimack Valley Project, and frankly, what our mutual, as a community, not us, but as a community, what mutual goals might be. I suspect that many of them are the same: reducing crime, making sure people report crimes, making sure that they feel safe reporting a crime, and that kind of thing. So.
Okay, I thank you very much this opportunity to
well, thank you very much.
To say our ideas about the immigration situation.
Attorney, accountant, and politician. Really now. All right. Thank you very much. We're going to take a late break now, as I'm in trouble for. We'll do weather, and then we'll hold for 5 or 10 minutes the final break of the hour. Thank you, Chris, for your patience. I think we have some callers waiting. We'll get to you as soon as we can. Thank you very much. We'll be right back.
Open mic!
Frank Kamoa and the Open Mic will be right back. Get in on the action. Call 978-374-1900. If you're enjoying this program, call and become a 97.9 WHAV FM member right now, or visit WHAV.net. Your membership helps keep vital community services on the air.
It's 7:45.
97.9 WHAV is the only FM station assigned to the city of Haverhill. Your membership is critical to continued operation. It's easy to join. Just click on the membership tab at WHAV.net.
Hi, I'm meteorologist Gary Best. Do you need to know if it's going to be hot or cold, wet or dry? Well, find out every half hour, 7 days a week with WHAV Weather. I'll keep you in touch with up-to-the-minute reports covering the greater Merrimack Valley and beyond. It's WHAV for accurate weather when you want it.
WHAV Weather!
I'm WHAV meteorologist Rob St. Pierre with WHAV Weather. And for tonight, we're going to see increasing clouds, maybe even a shower getting in here as we head through the overnight hours and toward daybreak. Nighttime low in the upper 60s. We're going to sneak in some sun for Tuesday. It is going to be more humid. We'll be in the mid to upper 80s. Watch for some showers and thunderstorms, especially in the afternoon. Showers and storms will ease off Tuesday night, low near 70, partly sunny and less humid Wednesday, low 80s. I'm WHAV meteorologist Rob St. Pierre. Your next WHAV weather in 30 minutes.
WHAV Open Mic!
From the Edwin B. Johnson Newsroom, WHAV presents the Open Mic Show with Frank Kamoa. Make your voice heard. Call 978-374-1900. That's 978-374-1900. And I guess we're back here on the Open Mic Show. I'm Tim Coco. As you may have heard earlier, Frank Kamoa had a back injury this weekend. He should be okay. And he's probably listening, maybe cursing, who knows right now, that I'm on the show. All right. I believe we have a backlog of calls. Chris, who are we going to do next?
Greg.
All right, Greg, you are on the Open Mic Show.
Hi, Tim.
All right, well, you can tell I was very uncomfortable with that.
What?
With the, the questions assume the Merrimack Valley's positions. I hope that without any bias, that I demonstrated that maybe we don't know what Merrimack Valley Project is, and but we'll see. What is your thought on it?
Well, a couple things. First of all, I had to take one thing. The reason I was rather dubious about one of the numbers that Ms. Mann touted. And I don't know how many undocumented, illegal, whatever term you wish to use, people who are in the United States from Mexico without papers, but the estimate is 5 to 6 million people, conservatively, because no one knows for sure. And she said there were more people from Canada living illegally in the United States than from Mexico. The population of Canada is about 35 million at this time. So if there are 6 million people from Canada living in the United States, that would imply something like 15 to 20% of the population of Canada is living illegally in the United States. And I have to find that extremely dubious.
That's a good question, and I guess I'm sure some people who are already looking on their Google searches to find out that.
Right.
You're right. I should have found out what the source of that was.
Yeah, I don't know what the source of that information was. And secondly, to be fair, two things I'd like to state. First of all, I am not an immigrant. I was born in the United States. Both of my parents were born in the United States. So they were not immigrants.
Okay.
They were.
And I guess that's true for my family, too, although my father was born to Italian immigrants.
My father was a native-born U.S. citizen. My mother was a native-born U.S. citizen. And the 14th Amendment, I'll explain what really was meant, and a lot of people, they don't teach this in grammar school. To be fair, what it was not only to grant former slaves citizenship, it was also meant to protect immigrants. And a lot of people don't know that. John Bingham was very...
That's a good point. That is a good point, because...
And I'll tell you what it was. Basically, first of all, I'm not an immigrant. My grandparents, my grandmother and grandfather, were immigrants and came to this country in 1908, actually of Italian extraction, but they were French. And they came through Ellis Island. But there really wasn't anything in those days known as an illegal alien or an illegal immigrant. Not too many. They were here because the United States needed people badly.
And I think that was what Alice was trying to tell us about the labor. It was a Labor Department issue. Very interesting.
And we also had a Western expansion going on at that time. Very much like Canada openly welcomed, even though they will welcome refugees now more than the United States is, at least on the surface. They did not have restrictive immigration right into the 1970s. As a matter of fact, if you had draft status of 1A and were facing felony charges, Canada would welcome you with open arms.
Oh, interesting.
And that's not the case today, because if you're in your 60s and you try to emigrate to Canada, you will not be let into the country to emigrate there. You can go there for a visit, but they won't welcome you with open arms from the United States necessarily. But that's beside the point. I'm rambling a little bit, and the United States did clamp down and changed immigration requirements in the late 1920s.
I just did a quick look, and obviously it needs more research. Department of Homeland Security says close to 130,000 Canadians overstayed their U.S. visa in fiscal year 2016. That doesn't answer your question, but it gives us maybe a sense. The reason I found the whole discussion frustrating is because I believe there are people with some legitimate concerns about immigration, about people overstaying, about people that they believe taking jobs away, that kind of thing. And I believe, and it wasn't among these questions, but I remember another question a WHAV listener sent in on another subject, but I think it relates to it. I think this person was concerned about the number of visas going to highly skilled workers, because the highly skilled worker from abroad taking jobs that perhaps we could have done. I'm going to guess at where that caller was going. That maybe we need to teach our kids life sciences so that we don't need to. We don't have to bring
in
it.
the data processing world, Tim.
Yes.
Okay. And the H-1B visa program. I'm not saying anything about my own company that I work for, but the H-1B visa program is being used to exploit many people. When I see
Well, I think that's where our other
thousands
caller
of
was
kids.
going. Yes.
Yeah, when I see thousands of kids come out of 2-year programs at places like Northern Essex and 4-year programs at various universities around the country, and they can't find workers, but a major company can find them out of a 90-day college in India and bring them over with an H-1B visa, yes, that's costing American jobs.
Now,
and I'm concerned about the future for America because there are so many kids coming out of universities that cannot find jobs.
Yeah, and I think
These companies are not expanding in this country, and I think that's the thing. And this morning in the Boston Globe, there was an article about H-2B visas down in Cape Cod, and the restaurant owners have their hair on fire and running up and down the street because they can't bring people in because of the visa restrictions for restaurant help and the like. And one guy said, I have to take anybody who comes to the door. I have to put a help wanted sign and take anybody who comes to the door and applies. And, when I was in high school, there were plenty of jobs like that because they couldn't, if I worked at Hampton Beach or Rye or someplace like that, they couldn't hire somebody from overseas to wash the dishes. They couldn't hire somebody to wipe the tables or wait on tables or they had to hire somebody, an 18, 19-year-old kid from the States, and pay him or her minimum wage. And I said, that's one of the big differences.
No, see, I think these are the legitimate questions. But as I was going through this, I didn't see how this related to what Merrimack Valley Project was, and I have to say now I'm going to get yelled at for this, I'm sure, later.
No.
If not,
no.
But I mean, I think that there are some people who have so much animosity over these issues that anyone who even somehow, some way, slightly defends one aspect of an immigrant's. Whether we're talking about, I'm sick of the terms, but Associated Press guides my discussion. Associated Press says there are no illegal people, and in journalism conventions there are people who are here illegally, that kind of thing. But I don't think that I think the listeners are giving Merrimack Valley Project kind of a broad brush, and I'm just trying to be fair. That maybe there's some things they would disagree on, but they haven't asked those questions.
Yeah.
And I think you make a good point, because I've heard this discussion of the H-1Bs, and I believe, one of our regular commenters, and it might be Duncan, has expressed great concern about the abuse of the H-1Bs, and you're backing that up. I don't think it's a subject that Merrimack Valley Project would even know about necessarily.
No, the phase of computing I work in is not affected by it, but but there are a lot of considerations there, and like we said, the H-2B visas for summer workers. A lot of kids can't find summer jobs, and on the other hand, conversely, the restaurant owners are complaining that they can't find people to work. So, okay, you're going to have to pay these people minimum wage and take Social Security taxes out, but hey, that's what a stronger America is about. Now, I know some people would be very angry. I mean, hey, you look at the recent presidential election. If, I'm doing okay. My daughter and her husband are doing okay, financially, professionally, and the like. But if I had a 22-year-old daughter or 25-year-old son who got out of college and is carrying $100,000 of student loan debt and can't find a job, I would be concerned because the economy is not expanding to allow these people those opportunities, and I would be angry. You're going to blame somebody. And one of the things that does arise, I don't know who asked the question, do they believe in open borders? Ms. Mann ducked the question.
Yeah, actually,
she intentionally ducked the question. She ducked the question. She dodged the question, and she said, well, we have to have some type of reform and rational policy, but she didn't say what it is. So that kind of
okay. I see that.
And, that was it. And the other thing I want to mention, the 14th Amendment, what a lot of people don't realize. When the 14th Amendment, prior to the Civil War, war between the states, whatever you wish to call it, there was a huge immigration influx into the United States, primarily from the potato famine of 1840, where these people came in. People came into to the United States and Canada and Australia and South Africa from Ireland to escape the famine, which was a tragedy, no doubt about it. And when there was a movement before the Civil War called the Americanism, the Nativist movement, also known as the Know Nothing movement.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and it was Millard Fillmore was elected president on that. But then Civil War came along, 1865, and slaves were freed. The Emancipation Proclamation, which was more of a military move than anything else, but
yeah, actually, considering there's no treaty ending that war, that's what that was.
No, the Civil War, there was no treaty because the United States was never at war with the Confederate States of America.
Because the Supreme Court ruled that they never could have separated, right?
Yes. Yep.
I mean, I know we're going to parse history. No one knows what we're talking about, but it's a good subject someday.
Well, long story short, after the Civil War ended, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery because there was still slavery existing in the United States after the Civil War. Maryland, West Virginia, Delaware were still slave territories, even though they were in the North, Kentucky. And
well, Maryland wasn't really sure what side it was going to be on. I think the forces made sure they stayed on the north side.
Yeah, but on the other hand, when John Bingham sat down to write the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment, there was no reference to slaves, no reference to anything like that. It was just, you're born in this country subject to its jurisdiction, and that implies, that the implication were diplomats. It did not apply to Native Americans, believe it or not. They were not citizens until 1925.
Yes.
But what it did apply to was it was not only intended to apply to slaves, it was also intended to apply to the children of Irish and German immigrants who came in before the war and the children of immigrants going forward. And a lot of people don't realize that, hey, if you're of Irish or Italian or Polish or Eastern European descent and your parents were born overseas but you were born here, you were protected by the 14th Amendment.
I think I found what Alice was referring to. This was a U.S. Border Patrol report, and it refers only to 2016. Now, maybe she's referring to something else, but at least we have this.
Immigration's slowing down.
By the end of the fiscal year, which means September 30th, 2016, some 630,000 visitors had failed to leave the U.S. So they came in legally, tourists, whatever, 630,000 of them. And that is more than the 415,000 people who were intercepted crossing the U.S.-Mexico boundary. Maybe that's what she's referring to. But Homeland Security said of the 630, 120,000 Canadians with expired visas were still living in the U.S. versus roughly 47,000 Mexicans. I guess that's what this is about, but it's only for the year 2016.
And it's also a little bit distorted because a lot of the people who crossed into the country from Mexico did not come here on visas at all.
Well, that's a good point. No,
whereas Canadians usually would, but a lot of the people who came in,
Canadians probably don't get as much scrutiny either crossing the border.
No, but they do now, I think. But the thing is that I'm not meaning, but I'm saying the reason I raise that number, you can distort numbers any way you want, but I'll bet you $1 that there are more people undocumented here in the United States that came from Mexico than there are that came from Canada.
Well, collectively,
that's just my observation.
Collectively, and I guess we'll have to see. I don't know that I know that number, or anyone here can tell us. But no, this is a good discussion, Greg, and I appreciate your raising those points. I don't think they necessarily. And that's why we're discussing it after that segment. I don't think they necessarily relate to the positions or the views of the Merrimack Valley Project. Maybe I misunderstood.
Right.
But I do think that this larger discussion that you're talking about is one that needs to take place.
Right.
And so
there is, like she said, a rational immigration policy, but I don't know what that rational immigration policy should be.
And I'm not sure that anyone will agree on that.
I would have liked to have had some, and she also mentioned about the banks, people being foreclosed, how bad it is, people being foreclosed. And I think I put the primary blame for that banking crisis on the banks, not so much because of not so much of the people who had those loans but were affected, but the banks making loans to people who had no reasonable way to pay them back. And that puts the rest of us as a society in jeopardy because we had to bail out the banks. We had to bail out from the...
Well, I would agree with that, but you're not making this point, but others are, and maybe you will make this point, but and we're very late for news, but there are people who shouldn't have gotten those loans, but it wasn't because of a government policy, and I keep hearing. There's some government policies that talk about redlining. You can't redline an area, that kind of stuff. But if you don't have the income to support the loan, most of those people went through mortgage companies that just manufactured the documents that supported the loan. And
well, that is the government because you're supposed to have some control over that.
Yeah,
fiscal financial policies are essential to the country running effectively.
It's
irresponsible to allow mortgage companies to do that.
Well, yeah, and I'll agree with you. I'll agree with you there. Now, one of the and we're off time and off subject, I suppose, but I had a discussion with a banker a few years ago, right after the 2008, a local banker, not one of the national ones. And I often have said to local bankers that you are aligning yourself with the big national banks for a reason I don't understand, because your interests are very different. Local banks didn't cause the economy to fail. It was the ones that went through the big banks, usually from the mortgage brokers, those little mortgage shops. But I said that because of these loans were just being approved, that's what actually caused the bubble. It created a supply and demand issue. I mean, let's face it. In 2008, I don't know if you know the value of your home. I knew what mine was.
Yep, I know what it is now.
It was ridiculously high, and
it still is.
And I said to myself, and a lot of people say, and I bought my house 10 years before that. And I paid too much then, or a few years before that, and I paid too much then. But what my problem is that I, had outgrown my one-bedroom condo, and I was waiting for the prices to come back down, and they just kept going up. And then you're finally forced to buy, and this banker just was completely oblivious to the effect that caused on causing the prices to rise.
Yeah. I can give you another parallelism. The availability of student loans allowed universities
By the way, WHAV LP Haverhill. We're covered.
Okay. I could have done that too. Where the LP stands for local programming.
That's right.
But the thing that I was thinking about, and that can be extended to the college loan situation, because these kids, a lot of youngsters took college loans because they were there, and tuitions rose accordingly, especially at private schools. And now
I think that's a great analogy. I think you're right.
It's a very good analogy that they were very loose. So we can charge, like Boston College, $60,000 a year
because it's free money.
It's okay. Take college loans, and if the parents can't pay them back, the kids are going to have to. And I'm kind of that I'm kind of shocked at, because that's where the crisis came up.
And they're exempted from bankruptcy, so that just the whole situation is bad. But I guess you and I will have to have this discussion on another night.
I'll let you go to the news, okay?
Hey, thanks so much.
Hold you.
Thank you
Have
so
a good
much.
night.
Take care. All right, late for news, but we got our ID in before 10 past, so I think we're covered. We're going to go to local news. We'll be back with the Open Mic Show. I know there were a number of you trying to get through, and it just wasn't time, but there will be now. So start dialing 978-374-1900.
Open mic.
Frank Kamoa and the Open Mic will be right back. Get in on the action. Call 978-374-1900. If you're enjoying this program, call and become a 97.9 WHAV FM member right now, or visit WHAV.net. Your membership helps keep vital community services on the air.
It's 8:09.
WHAV LP Haverhill.
Here's what's happening in local news. City Council will be asked to approve another downtown waterfront residential project, this one much smaller in scale than the recently constructed Harbor Place and recently approved 10-story Haverhill Heights. Phil Rice, trustee for Sanders Courier Realty Trust, seeks the council's permission to create 4 market-rate residential units in the building that now houses the Lasting Room restaurant and bar. Rice's request will be considered in a public hearing when the council meets at 7 p.m. Tuesday in the Theodore Pelosi Jr. City Council chambers on the second floor of Haverhill City Hall. Comments for and against the project will be allowed. The units would occupy the top 2 floors, which are currently unused, at 116 to 122 Washington Street. Under the Waterfront District zoning regulations, the project requires a special permit from the council. The exterior of the former shoe factory will not be changed, Rice said. The developers plan to lease 5 parking spaces in the MVRTA parking garage on Granite Street. In a letter to the City Council, Economic Development and Planning Director William Pillsbury recommended approval. The proposed project represents an excellent development consistent with all the goals of the city to revitalize downtown, Pillsbury wrote. The redevelopment of the current Lasting Room building into a mixed-use market-rate project is a strong positive indication of the private sector confidence in investing in Haverhill. Other agenda items include pay raises for the mayor and city council to become effective on January 1st, permits for a series of movies on 6 consecutive Thursday nights beginning July 13th in the waterfront parking lot next to Haverhill Bank, and discussions on the Merrimack Street restaurant bump-outs, and a progress report on plans to build a softball field for the HHS girls team. The Lone City Council, to vote against this year's city budget, is calling for what he calls a blueprint for Haverhill's future. In a guest column appearing at WHAV.net today, City Council President John Mitchison said the city will attract businesses and good jobs if it first improves education, public safety, and housing. Currently, the burden on both public safety and the schools is increasing as more families in the school district are disadvantaged financially and are struggling, Mitchison said. We need to explore the best ways to not only attract the right workforce, but also grow it within our city. To achieve his goal, the council president said Haverhill must create a long-term, comprehensive strategy and action plan. Once in place, the blueprint would be followed by budgets that meet the plan and measures to track performance of city services and schools. A man who allegedly shot women from Haverhill and Sandown, New Hampshire during a drive-by shooting back in March has been indicted on assault and firearms charges by an Essex County grand jury. Brian Brito, 22, of Manchester, New Hampshire and North Andover, was indicted on 2 counts of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, causing serious bodily injury, 2 counts of armed assault with intent to murder, and carrying a firearm without a license, according to Essex County District Attorney Jonathan Blodgett's office. Brito, who was not identified as a suspect in March, was already being held without bail on a Lynn murder and North Andover aggravated rape charges. As WHAV first reported in March, two women, a 19-year-old from Haverhill and a 20-year-old from Sandown, New Hampshire, received serious injuries after a drive-by shooting in Lawrence. The Haverhill woman was shot once in the head and airlifted to a Boston hospital, while the other was shot in the leg and taken to a local hospital by ambulance, according to Lawrence Police Chief James Fitzpatrick. At the time, police said a man wearing a ski mask and gray hooded sweatshirt and driving a silver BMW four-door sedan pulled up to a parked car with the women inside and opened fire. Detectives did not consider the incident a random act of violence. Methuen police also responded once the women fled into that city. Brito was also accused of shooting and killing a food delivery man on Bowler Street in Lynn, robbing a North Andover convenience store, and raping a store clerk March 27th, 2 days after the shooting. He was indicted in May for murder, 2 counts of aggravated rape, kidnapping, armed and mass robbery, carrying a firearm without a license, and possession of ammunition. Brito will be arraigned on the new charges at his next court appearance, August 10th. Remember, WHAV is the only Haverhill-based news source. There's always more at WHAV.net. In the Edwin V. Johnson newsroom, this is Tim Coco.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Priscilla Huff. Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi has formally declared victory over the Islamic State in Mosul. The U.S.-led coalition warns lots of fighting remains. The son of the American president is answering questions about his meeting last summer with a Russian attorney with ties to the Kremlin. The International Red Cross is tracking more than 300,000 cases of cholera in Yemen. Ukraine eyes NATO membership.
Wave weather.
I'm WHAV meteorologist Rob St. Pierre with Wave Weather. And for tonight, well, we're going to see increasing clouds, maybe even a shower getting in here as we head through the overnight hours and toward daybreak. Nighttime low in the upper 60s. We're going to sneak in some sun for Tuesday. It is going to be more humid. We'll be in the mid to upper 80s. Watch for some showers and thunderstorms, especially in the afternoon. Showers and storms will ease off Tuesday night, low near 70, partly sunny and less humid Wednesday, low 80s. I'm WHAV meteorologist Rob St. Pierre. Your next Wave Weather in 30 minutes.
WHAV is on Facebook. For quick access, visit WHAV.net and click on the Facebook icon. 97.9 FM, WHAV.
Catch the wave, WHAV. Merrimack Valley. Open mic.
From the Edwin V. Johnson newsroom, WHAV presents the Open Mic Show with Frank Camola. Make your voice heard. Call 978-374-1900. That's 978-374-1900. And this is Tim Coco filling in for Frank Camola. Frank had a back injury this weekend. He should be okay. We wish him the best. If it isn't obvious to the listener and the viewer, WHAV.tv or HC Media Channel 22, and we thank HC Media for carrying this program, I was uncomfortable during that discussion because, well, one, I'm a little close to it. I have a spouse who went through a lot of immigration issues, never illegal to use that term for even a minute. But there are a lot of misperceptions and misconceptions, and I felt maybe we were hitting Merrimack Valley Project with all of the debate when that wasn't really their focus. Now, you can disagree with me. That's fine. I love to agree to disagree. But I felt that they weren't responsible for the entire immigration debate. They had some particular concerns. I also think that maybe it's unfair to say that everyone who supports them and everyone who is a member or everyone represented by is somehow living in the United States illegally. Now, the other debates, you can debate whether people should learn English. You can debate about what the cost is to education. All of those things are legitimate, but I'm not sure that they are solely the domain of the Merrimack Valley Project. I know nothing about this group other than the initial stories that we ran. I think a couple of years ago they had a rally, and I may even be mixing them up with someone else, a rally at GAR Park. So I don't want anyone to read into this. I simply was concerned that they were getting hit with all of the concerns and questions that are of a broader scope and not necessarily why they exist. It's an interesting one. It's a difficult one. And I hope if you disagree with anything I've said that you'll agree to disagree, because I'm willing to hear your views. I think Greg, who just called just before the news, made a good point. There are some highly professional jobs that are going via H-1B, which raised the point that I was trying to get at earlier, is that I think some of these multinational corporations are frankly the most treasonous to the United States. They are the ones that don't want their profits to come back to the U.S. Yes, they're protecting their investors and so on, but those investors aren't necessarily the retired school worker or custodian whose pension depends on it. A lot of that is just simply greed. And so I have more opinions on this than I even thought I had, and probably feel more strongly about it than I thought I did. But to leave the big corporations out of the debate and to kind of stick all of this on some little local group, it just seemed a little bit out of hand. So I'm willing to hear your concerns and your comments. Are we able to get that caller back on the line, Chris? Were we able to get that caller back? Because we're going to try to get that last caller back on the line, because I believe he was waiting a long time and didn't get a chance to come through. But we'll see what we can do about that. But meanwhile, let's talk about some more positive things. Tom Bergeron was in this very room not that long ago. I spent a couple of hours with him. Tom and I worked together at the original WHAV in the late 1970s. I related some stories. We'll someday replay the whole discussion. But Tom himself was operating these controls. This is second nature to him, and that was a real treat to have him here. But Tom's reason for here, and it was his idea, and I'm so grateful for it, was to help me ask you to support WHAV. This isn't the old WHAV where there were a dozen merchants in downtown Haverhill, department stores and specialty stores and jewelry that paid the bills of WHAV through their advertising. They're not there anymore, which is maybe related to our other discussion, but they're just not there. And so public radio, which is a term I just learned people don't know what it means and don't understand it, but I think Channel 2 or WBUR radio. These are listener-supported stations, and typically the listeners pay up to 2/3 of the bills, and the sponsors that are available, the stores that are still around, and the businesses whose headquarters are around here, London, like National Grid, paid for things. So, but anyway, those are okay. There's a little bit of my rant. I haven't done this show in maybe a month and or more, and I guess I'm out of the habit of being nice. So let's take a call. You're on the Open Mic Show.
Good evening, Tim. How are you?
Jerry, I wanted to hear from you because I miss you, frankly. I haven't been on this show for a while now.
I miss you too, really.
And
I like the old, I like the format that you had before, but.
Well, I think we're kind of learning, getting comfortable with how to bring some of that back. I know that Frank himself had planned an hour tonight of just listener calls. I used up a lot of that time myself. So,
relative to the immigration I just wanted to say is I can remember talking to my grandfather and grandmother about their immigration, and basically, actually, what they did, and I'm sure that your grandparents probably did the same thing. They went to Ellis Island for about 2.5 weeks. You know, my great-grandfather came from Ireland, so he had a brogue, but he could speak English, and that's one of the difficulties, I guess, is that. But they were at Ellis Island for 2.5 weeks, and the only thing that they really needed was, number one, was you had to be sponsored by a cousin or the United States, and the second thing was that you had to have a job. And then there was a orientation for about 2.5 weeks at Ellis Island, and then there was a period of, I guess, good behavior or something like that, and you were a citizen. So, like you explained, and I know you're well-read, etc., what happened? What happened to immigration, and what were the changes? And I know it would be a long discussion, but you can you tell me and the audience?
I think, and I could be wrong. Here are the two things I think. One, the Spanish-American War. The United States captured not only Puerto Rico, but the Philippines and Cuba.
And Guam.
And Guam, and there's some others out there. We captured all of this, and we kept some of it. We had always promised that we were only protecting Cuba. Now look where that got us, and that's another political discussion. But we gave Cuba back right away. I think 1946 we did the Philippines, but we
still might have bases in Cuba, though.
Yeah, we do. At least one that's holding prisoners. Yeah. But in any event, I believe what happened is that we, Canada's had to deal with this since its founding, but Canada has clearly a French-speaking population, an English-speaking population, and I guess, maybe this is just natural human nature and maybe not the best kind of human nature, but even the English and French portions of Canada don't get along at times because we've heard of secession movements. Maybe it's just a natural thing, unfortunate as that is, that we don't like it when we can't communicate in the same way or form. But the U.S. took these Spanish properties, and it's been more than 100 years. What did Teddy Roosevelt think he was doing? I mean,
you're right.
I mean, what did he think we were going to do? How did he think that we were going to mesh these together? The Canadians haven't been able to do it, so I don't know. That's one. On the other, I remember all of your question, but the other, my grandparents on my father's side, and Alice Mann alluded to this, and I thought it was very insightful. She said it was once a labor department issue, not a Justice Department issue, and that makes perfect sense because my grandfather
hit it right on the head. Tim.
Yeah, my grandfather came here because they needed people to turn out the textiles in Lawrence.
And the people, the artisans that built the great wall in Methuen were all from Italy, too. And they were masons.
Right, and there's lots of, maybe some of those populations, and maybe this was a good thing, took on United States values and assimilated. And I think there's some resistance to the fact that we don't assimilate, or there's at least a view that hasn't happened. But I'll tell you that in the last 20 years, 30 years, I actually think the Latino population has assimilated very well, at least the younger people.
I think so, too.
I mean, the younger people probably speak you or I. They went through the good schools. They are now our doctors, our lawyers,
Exactly.
And I think this happened once to the Italians and the Irish. The first generation and a half, okay, a little struggle with some language issues, some cultural issues, but then
Not a great lot of trouble though, because.
And then everybody enjoyed Prince Spaghetti Day on Wednesdays.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I don't know, and maybe I'm just a little too caught up in it myself tonight.
But I can, as I said, it was so easy then. It was so easy, and now it's so complicated. Green cards and all this.
Yeah, I mean, maybe our guests were mincing words to use one of their about administrative versus criminal. Are we parsing terms too closely? I don't know. But I just wonder how this country has become so separated. How you must see it yourself. You're afraid to talk to your neighbor because people feel so strongly about issues now.
Yeah.
That you can't even have a reasonable conversation anymore and agree to disagree. I guess we just got a couple of calls here that we couldn't put on the air because they were pretty unpleasant.
Is that right?
I mean, to the point is that we'd lose our license if we broadcast them.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to put four-letter words on the air.
Yeah. I know.
But in any event.
Yeah.
Well, Jerry, it is good to hear from you. I'm sorry we had so little time. And
No, that's quite all right. No.
But I'm really happy to hear from you.
Maybe next time we can talk about the story that was in the Tribune today about the brown water.
Oh, the algae on the Merrimack, yes.
And why it happened,
Right. And maybe we can talk more later about why they don't let the New Hampshire for us. But anyway.
It's interrelated, actually.
That's what I thought.
It is. It's interrelated. There was no flow in the river, so as a result, all the sediment from wastewater treatment plants, etc., there was no, there was no assimilation. In other words, and so what we're getting now, and we had a drought, so all that sediment was at the bottom of the river, and now we've had rain, etc., an increase in velocity, and what do we get? We get scouring of the river, and we get brown color.
We'll pursue that again, and I hope we have a
contrary
chance.
To one of the writers in the Tribune, there are very few places on the Merrimack River that can swim. He said it was a Class B, and so you could swim and fish and etc. The only place that's really approved to swim is in Lowell at that big ramp. That's my knowledge.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Good point. Well, Jerry, I'm sorry we are out of time this time, but I'm really glad you were able to get your call in.
I'm glad you were on tonight. I really, Methuen has had a major problem with their system, their electronic system. You can't understand what the councilors are saying, and it's been terrible. I think they almost came to a point of adjourning the meeting and continuing it because of the repair of their equipment.
Oh, okay.
I hope you people have a backup. Do you?
Well, we have several, but I don't know how much of it all comes together when there's a crisis. But
yeah, there was a crisis tonight.
Well,
you couldn't hear what was being said, and the question, I guess, is you couldn't hear public participation. It was a mess, and
but you're hearing us okay. Well, that's good.
All right.
Well, thank you very much, Jerry. Really appreciate talking with you again.
See you again.
All right, take care. Thanks.
I hope.
Yes, thank you. All right, I guess that'll wrap it up for the Open Mic Show. Send your nasty calls and cards and letters and emails to my attention, and we'll take them one at a time. All right, until next time, looking forward to having Frank back. Join Frank Kamoa live on the Open Mic again next Monday night at 6:30. The opinions expressed on the Open Mic Show are not necessarily those of WHAV writers or affiliated stations. The Open Mic Show came to you from the Edwin B. Johnson Newsroom.
It's 8:33.
Those Boston stations don't always understand weather in the Merrimack Valley. Stay informed with WAVE weather every 30 minutes, 24 hours a day on Soft Gold, WHAV.